Yeah.
Let me ask this difficult question of you, Rian.
Yep.
Is this department fit for purpose, the Department of Higher Education?
No.
That's a difficult one.
No. There's very few governments in the world that have a Minister of Higher Education. There's Ministers of AI and Technology in the UAE, and I don't see us having one of those. And then I think it asks the question, are we a centrally planned economy or are we a free economy? Okay. Because the reason being, if government was a regulator, like they're supposed to be, and they told us when we're stepping out of line and they're keeping people safe in the sector, they would let us come up with programs and deliver the needs that is in front of us. But government is extremely prescriptive. Okay. For me, as a private institution, I am the largest graduator of IT skills in South Africa. I graduate more than 7 public universities, the largest public universities combined, at a time when IT skills is one of the most key things on this continent. Government stops those universities from expanding their programs. They can take in 300, 700 potential people to study IT in a year. Why is government regulating that? Because of some funding formula that was dreamt up by somebody in 97, a PQM, that now prescribes to us what is real. Because I've tried to collaborate with public universities. It's almost practically impossible. We cannot offer joint degrees. We cannot collaborate. We cannot work together. Okay? And if we do, it's extremely confrontational. Okay? The second aspect is, even if we do find a way to work together, they'll lose subsidy because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So it is definitely not in the public's interest to collaborate with us. Okay? But yet we have a national development plan, and we're now being asked, so what are we doing about it? So today, if I decide that AI is the future, I then put it on my program for accreditation, and 3 years from now, if I fought with the regulator for blood, sweat and tears, then somebody from UNISA is going to rewrite my program to look like theirs, okay? Because it's not going to serve South Africa. It's going to serve some funding formula. Okay? So government, get out of the business of education and get into the regulation of education and give us the ability to come up with programs that can drive innovation, because innovation-driven growth is the way that this continent will move forward.
Is the frustration the same in the public sector? I'll start with you, Marie.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if it's improved because I haven't been in the business of new programs for a while, but certainly when we were, it was incredibly frustrating because of this 3-year lag. So you would have a good idea and you'd put a program together and everybody would be very excited, but then there would be so many steps that it had to go through and so many people, and coming back with sort of minuscule type of critiques that then took more time. So it would be years before we could actually implement the program. And I think what you're saying is that it stifles innovation. So it's very hard to move with the times and very hard to respond fairly quickly. And so people manipulate to a certain extent. So for example, they might introduce a module, like I say, if it's more than 50%, we've got to go through all these hoops, more than 50% change. If it's less than 50% change, we can just do it ourselves. So that also, kind of stops people from really thinking out of the box and doing something new. I do understand to a certain extent why it's like that, I have to say, because it's public money and you do have to have a level of accountability and quality assurance and peer review to make sure that government is not spending its money on programs that are not good. So I think it's perhaps the capacity to manage that regulatory system is the problem more than and the complexity of the regulatory system, not a regulatory system in and of itself.
Is there an appreciation, do you find, that this lag of 3 years is actually causing not only frustration, but it's costing this country money?
Yeah, yeah.
Because now we're delaying the
Yeah. process
process of graduating the skill that we need in order to grow the economy.
Oh, I see.
I
You
have
really
very
want to
strong
The knives are coming out.
No, there isn't. And I'll tell you, one of the things that strikes me is that the way in which those bodies, SACWA, CHE, and DHET, respond to things is with more regulation. Now, that wouldn't necessarily be a problem, let's assume for the sake of the argument, but the fact is they don't have the capacity to manage what it is they're supposed to do.
Yeah, that's the issue.
So frankly, what is the point of now? Actually, what's happened, in my opinion, is that it's just become a big self-serving bureaucracy, because what it is intended to achieve, which is quality in higher education, I don't think can be attributed to what the CHE does or what SACWA does or what the DHET does, with all due respect. I think it is attributable to the institutions
Yeah.
themselves, which is why I maintain all the time that there are good private and good public institutions and bad public and bad private institutions, because quality is actually good for business. So whether you're in public or private, having a good quality program and a good student experience is good for business. We know that our students come from word of mouth recommendations most of the time. So why would it be, that good learning experience, a quality experience, is not about what we put on the HEQC website. And the HEQC's attempts now with the new quality assurance framework to fix that, I'm afraid, are actually just becoming another layer, another more, again, we just over-regulate. And I think, to speak to what Divya said, I think some of what's happened is, in becoming a bureaucratic process and a bureaucracy, we've lost some of the kind of intellectual depth that we did see in the late 90s and early 2000s. And yes, there were bun fights like nothing on earth. I was part of those. But the fact is that there was a kind of deep intellectualism and a commitment to change, because we can't forget that everything in this country is rooted in apartheid. It's as simple as that. And the fact is that those trends and patterns and strains and constraints, they persist to this day. So in 27 years, not much has changed if you're sitting at a historically disadvantaged university.
Which is a problem,
Of
because
course.
the white paper, when published in 1997, was seeking, amongst other things, to create an agenda for the role of higher education in reconstruction and development, right? What I'm hearing is that in 27 years, we have hardly moved the needle when it comes to that.
Some have, some institutions
Yeah,
have.
bits and pieces.
Yeah.
I also think that part of what we're wrestling with is, I think you were saying it earlier, Gloria, there's an overburdening of higher education to solve all of the problems.
Yeah.
So yes, transformation, yes, diversity, yes, that's on the agenda and that's part of the white paper. But in addition to that, we've just kept adding more and more, so that that is the answer to all of our problems. And I think it's at that point that we start getting confused about the purpose of higher education.
Can I just get clarity?
Yeah.
You do not want to be absolved of any responsibility in contributing to a growth of this country.
No.
And all of the social elements that we need to address. Because 30 years into democracy, we are still faced, the majority of South Africans are still faced with the challenges that existed pre-1994. For some, actually, it's worsened.
Yes,
and surely higher education, in whatever form, has a role to play in addressing that, right?
But then we have to ask a different set of questions. Because if higher education is going to serve that purpose, then it's not just a BCom. What is the BCom in service of transformation? What is a BCom in service of changing the country? And I think that's also where there's a bit of a wrestling, because I think, unfortunately, in some ways, disciplines just become their own thing, right? So we've got qualifications in a range of disciplines, but we're not asking the fundamental question: how does this serve society. Even in academia, it's a self-serving space. I mean, if we think about how it is about itself to a large extent, I think there we need to be asking questions about how what we're producing as research outputs, for example, actually make a difference in society, are speaking directly, and I think we need to figure out ways to make what is positioned at a very high level palatable and accessible, so that actual return on that investment, that return on the research output is demonstrable, is actually visible in society. And I think this one's a tricky one to navigate, because there are sensitivities around how we think and feel about being academics. And maybe that's also where the mirror needs to come into the conversation, is that if we're honest about what we are ourselves supported by, then maybe we'll also start asking some more critical questions about what it's doing for us, and how that's also maybe misaligned with making a difference in society.
For sure. Maureen, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there are two things that have happened in the last very short while that have been an absolute spur into this kind of rethinking about what we're doing, who we are, where are we going, what do we want to achieve. And the one was COVID, and the other was the whole decolonization discussion. So with the decolonization, there were, discussion, although nobody could really agree what that actually meant. That was part of the issue, that there was so much opportunity for discussion. Who are we? Who do we represent? What material do we use? What contribution are we making? That had nothing to do with the DHET, but that was about a social movement, so to speak. And the other one was COVID, because of having to move to online learning. And that opened up the huge spaces around the diversity of our learners, the access to technology and hardware, software, etc., opened up new ways of teaching, new ways of assessment. So I think the last few years it's been stressful, but I think there's been an opening up, that was my experience, quite traumatic in some way, but an opening up of the kind of deep questions that you say need to be asked, not because of the DHET and not because of regulation, but because of outside forces, which is a good thing actually.